Hi, everybody. Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sue. I'm so excited to be back. I was out of the country on a trip and then got COVID and got trapped there for an extra week. So I've been off the grid for quite a while, and it feels really good to be back with all of you. I'm going to start by saying that coaches are undervalued. And the reason I say that is because when you have a great coach and your kid has that trusted adult in their life, you it's such gratitude from the side of the parents to have another adult loving your child, and not just another adult loving your child, but another adult who is probably closer in age to them, who has a different connection where the judgment is gone and the door is open. And so if you have experienced that relationship with a coach and your kid, you know that we undervalue them. And today we are here with two really devoted, wonderful coaches. I think, Dave, are you still coaching, or you were the
partner of Jill's cross country team from a
ah,
coaching standpoint. So we get to speak all the time about her team, but I'm no longer coaching football.
yeah, but and Jill's still in it. But what was clear when I talked to the two of you is how much you loved it and how much you loved those kids, which also means that they confided in you. And so you understand a different side of what we see as parents, what teachers see, what all the other adults in their lives see. So first of all, I'm going to just say thank you for your involvement in teenagers' lives and in helping shape their futures. Jill and Dave Henry met as high school coaches. It's a sweet little story if you want to tell us that after. And they are co-authors, which, like, what marriage can do that? That's fascinating. Co-authors of The Greatest College Health Guide You Never Knew You Needed. Okay, so here's the book. I think I'm showing it to you. Everyone got it? And we are lucky to have 4 books to give away. So if you would like to be entered into the raffle, email editor@yourteenmag.com, and hopefully Jessica will get that in the comments so that people who are watching it later can also send an email. So yeah, let's go off script for a second and just tell me how you started dating, because it's just a cute story.
Well, I was a teacher at the time, and we were working on the same campus. Dave was coaching football on the lower campus. I was coaching upstairs. But I would sort of walk by the football field and try to catch his eye, because I'd been there for a long time, and he was obviously new that year that we met. And so we sort of had like a high school romance, but as two adults in PE clothes. And I taught a lot of the senior football players, and so there was just conspiring among the high school students to get us together, which sort of felt like Clueless, if anybody remembers that movie. And my girls saw him ask me out, and so ended up giving me dating advice. 16-year-old girls were like, "What are you going to wear tonight?" And don't give him math problems to solve, because I have regrettably done that in the past.
Her team was very concerned that she was going to challenge me to a push-up contest, which gives you an idea of our dynamic.
They were really concerned I was just going to blow it. They were like, "Don't talk in your weird man voice to him." And so I really ended up getting like an hour and a half of dating advice from teenage girls.
Okay, and then you got married. So here we are.
It all worked out. Yeah, maybe I should give them more credit.
Yeah.
We actually hired many of her, we hired a bunch of her students to be the wait staff at our wedding. And so
adorable.
Contributed
it was like the rehearsal. Yeah, and actually we did a 5K on the day of our wedding so that some of our athletes could participate in some of the wedding stuff. And we were also on a running team at the time, so we had all of them come. So it was a full like community, sports community event.
Not all of the wedding guests were excited for the 5K.
Very
few. But I want to say that story is not told often. Like the day of our wedding, we did a 5K. Anyway, let's get on to the advice, because you have an inside view into our kids, their minds and their hearts. And so just start with, like, something happened as you were coaching where you thought, we think there's a book here that's never been written. How did that happen?
So it was about 6 years ago at this point. This fall will be 6 years. At the end of the cross country season, we invite all of the seniors over to our home and have a senior brunch. And at that brunch, cross country is in the fall, obviously. So the girls were talking about the college application process, and they're in the middle of, milling through that stress. And concerns about the freshman 15 came up, as they do when you're a high school girl thinking about, well, I'm no longer going to have sports, so how do I stay in shape? But as we dug a little deeper, their concerns went a little deeper. So they see the news about the college mental health crisis, and they see the statistics on sexual assault and drinking related deaths. And so their big concern was, how am I going to take care of myself in this environment? How do I translate what I've learned in cross country about health and wellness to this college environment, which seems so fraught with struggle? And so we really wanted to help.
We initially thought that we would just find a resource that already existed and something that we could give to them and say, here, this is a great blueprint of how to take care of yourself now that you're outside of your parents' supervision all the time. And frankly, everything that we found felt very dry and clinical. Almost all colleges and universities have health information on their websites, but they have a real professional obligation to be professional about this information and present it in a way that is, here are the stats, take it or leave it. And so, especially as coaches, we felt like we could help contextualize this information. And probably the best way to do that was to use student stories from around the country. And so we use our own personal experience as an entry point into all of these topics, but we surveyed hundreds of students across the country, current and former grads in college, in order to try and gather the best advice possible. So in each of these chapters, we use these student quotes as a through line to help provide a sense of community. So if you're reading advice from a freshman at UCLA, it doesn't feel like you're just reading about carbohydrates. You're reading about somebody who struggled with a certain specific area.
Okay, so let's start first with, like, so you heard about the freshman 15. What was your solution for these kids? What did you put out there for them to start thinking about?
I mean, we talked to them a little bit about, the nutrition and the exercise pieces, but as you dig deeper, it's so much. There's so many things in this college environment that impact how they feel physically as well as mentally. And so when we started talking about writing a book, we wanted to really incorporate as much as we could, make it as comprehensive as possible. So, in the book, we start with nutrition and we head off the concerns about the freshman 15, which is honestly more of a myth than anything, but it is in the news every year as students are going back to school. So we wanted to address that right at the forefront. And I was a victim of, not eating particularly well and then feeling like garbage after my freshman year. So we start with nutrition. We also talk about alcohol because—
Wait, before you move on to alcohol, can you
Yeah.
give us like 2 tips that someone listening right now can talk to their kid about? Like, I know that some of it was positioning yourself in the dining room, right? Like, so what are the tips?
Piece of it. So access is the big thing that changes when you get to college with the dining hall, is that you have this unfettered access to a lot of foods that you probably haven't eaten that frequently or in that quantity. And so one part of it that we talk about, which you just mentioned, is really trying to limit your access as much as possible to the foods that you tend to overdo it with or tend to have to exercise a lot of restraint with. So that can come in positioning yourself in the dining hall. For a lot of students, it's leaving those foods out of your room. So in your dorm room, instead of stuffing tons of snacks that aren't particularly nourishing in your mini fridge or in your closet, reserving those as treats rather than making them something that you constantly have access to. And I think a big part of it is just learning about nutrition sort of by doing. And we suggest that a lot in the book, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But just listening to your body is a big part of it. That when students are used to sort of eating the same things at home and having their parents maybe control portions, they might not have as much experience with, oh, I just ate a whole pizza and now I feel terrible. And so part of it is, even though it's unsatisfying advice to some extent because it's not like a quick fix, learning how to tune in with yourself and pay attention to, when I ate X, I felt like this, and both in terms of quantity and type of food. So the book gives a lot of different tips because different people have different vices, right? I was dessert destroyed me in college because the soft serve machines, there's no cutoff. Like, you can keep cranking that that handle as much as you want. Some people are going to be into the fried food. So I think it's about trying to figure out where you tend to have your slippery slope. And then by paying attention to the signs your body is giving you, learn to, course correct a bit by changing access or changing, the dish you put your food on.
And
A
one
lot
of
of
the
advice
things,
we all get. Go ahead.
One of the things that I found fascinating talking to you and looking at the book is that parents having that conversation with your kid is difficult. I mean, it's like immediately you step into a zone of you think I'm going to put on weight. Maybe it gets very complicated. But the beauty of this book is you can just suggest to your kid, there's some great tips in here that I don't know about. And I think they'll really give you take the time right now to think about it, have a strategy, which might fail, but then you can go back to it, right? So I think that's one of the really big gifts you offer in this book is it's written for teenagers. It reads like it's written for teenagers. And there's advice in there that probably we don't think about till after it happens, but you could think about it before.
Parents and teens an opportunity to look at something from the same side. So to your point about this charge dynamic, anytime you bring up a suggestion, it doesn't matter what it is. As a parent bringing up a suggestion to a teenager, that can be a complicated situation. And so when you have something that you can stand on the same side of the fence and, hey, look at this, or look what this one sophomore said. What do you think about that? All of a sudden, the conversation changes from I'm going to tell you what I want you to do versus now let's look at this together and see what we think.
Yeah, we got feedback from parents last year who read it with their kids before college, and one of them wrote us an email and was like, we were just talking around the dinner table like, well, this is what Jill and Dave say that you should do. And so, to Dave's point, it really felt like they're united looking at one piece of information coming from two people rather than two opposing sides.
Yeah, I love the idea of being on the same side of this conversation instead of being the enemy. Okay, Jessica Port, who is in here right now making comments for our audience, also shared. Thanks, Jessica. We love comments. Everyone jump in with yours. I drank soda more than water for my first semester of college, and I definitely learned what made my body feel sick real quick. Yeah, that's a good one because it's just there. It's like water. So, okay, let's move on to some of the other topics that you found when you talked to the kids really started to bubble to the top of these are real issues.
Access to alcohol in college is so different than the experience in high school. And obviously, we're not encouraging anybody who's underage to drink. But the reality of the situation is that most students will become of drinking age while they are in college. And so, having some baseline information about frequency and about volume so that they can understand how to set their own personal limits and, more importantly, set some personal intentions, and so they can make their own rules for themselves about, well, I'm only going to go out twice a week, or I'm only going to party once a week, or whatever that number is. They can arrive at that intention before they start going out. And then secondly, most importantly, is having a concept of limits. We all, based on our body type, based on our gender, have a baseline of how much alcohol we can process at any one time. And these blood alcohol content charts are available online. They're available in our book. And it's a quick way of understanding that, oh, for my size, I can't have more than 3 drinks in a night, or I can't have more than 4 drinks within 2 hours. That kind of information is completely lost when the conversation is all about, well, don't drink until you're 21. Well, I'm 21 now, so what am I going to do about this?
Well, or more importantly, let's be honest, they're not waiting till they're 21. So let them know that you are not supporting their underage drinking, but if they do it, here's the way to be safe.
This time of year for all college students is the first few weeks of their freshman semester. And that's because so many students have been so excited to get on their own and make these choices for themselves. And they haven't had an opportunity to think about, well, maybe I shouldn't be pounding this bottle of whiskey. That's a terrible idea. We're not trying to use scare tactics, but the truth of the matter is that someone dies every single year from alcohol. And that's because they simply don't know that if you drink too much of it, it's a poison and you will die from that. And so having an understanding of what you can do to figure out a limit for yourself is something everybody should be thinking about before they head off to school.
Well, and one quick thing I would add to that really fast is what we found from the data is that a quarter of college students don't drink at all. And what was cool to be able to include in our book is feedback from some of those students who were like, I was really afraid that as somebody who was choosing not to drink, that I wouldn't be able to be, involved in the social scene. But that wasn't true. I found my people, nobody pressured me. So again, just quickly touching on the fact that it was really nice to have student voices in the book to talk about all aspects of this. The kids who overdid it and had to have an ambulance called on them and what that experience was like. and the kids who never drink, and the fact that they were still able to feel like they were a part of the social fabric of their school. But just being able to have a conversation about drinking, both with the combination of the research and the data and the real facts about it, but also student experience tied in, ends up being just a powerful way to talk about that topic.
Okay, I just want to say hi to Jerry. We love seeing Jerry on our calls, and Jerry says information is king, which is precisely what drove you to write this book, because you were seeing kids not having questions but not having answers. So in your, I don't remember how many kids you interviewed. What was that number? Hundreds?
Hundreds.
Okay, so as you're sitting there, you kind of probably go into this thinking, well, I've been a coach for a number of years and I've got my finger on the pulse. What surprised you most?
One of the things that we, when you're looking at the survey responses, that we saw it was consistent between juniors, seniors, recent grads. The thing that they were most excited about before they came in was the freedom. And the thing that was most challenging to navigate as new students was the freedom. It was sort of this double-edged sword of the idea that they now have, fewer in their mind responsibilities and obligations, which we all find out really isn't true. There's just as many, they're just not scheduled for you. You have to figure out how to do it. It was that part that was really hard because they hadn't had any experience scheduling themselves. If you think about the high school experience for most kids, their days are pretty set. They have a time they need to be at school. They're at school throughout the whole day. If they play sports, that's where they go next. They come home, do homework, and they repeat. College schedule, varies throughout the weekdays, and then their homework time isn't slotted into a specific position like it might have been previously. So really the biggest takeaway that we found was that freedom that ended up, was something they were so much looking forward to, ended up being the most difficult thing to overcome.
And while we saw certain students say that it worked best for them to work in the mornings, and other ones that said it worked best for them at night, what was interesting to see as a consensus among seniors and juniors was that they had identified a time for them that worked best for when they would get their work done.
Okay, so these kids have they're talking to you about this freedom, and I don't know how many of those hundreds of kids you actually knew, but my kids always had not so many.
Not so many. We did a snowball system with the surveying, so we knew like the first 15.
Okay, so then this is just a gut question. What's your gut feeling? My kids have always felt like the kids who were most restricted in high school had the hardest time with this freedom, when it goes from like almost no autonomy to like, an open day. Is that anything you've noticed as a coach?
I think the way that I've seen it personally is the restriction, if it's been related to like partying and alcohol, there's a real boomerang, and they really have to figure it out. They come in, kind of like Dave said, very excited for that type of freedom, and then learn the hard way. But I think universally, the management of time affects all of them, because they tend to be restricted by the circumstances of high school, not necessarily by their parents, but the scheduling restriction for a high school student who goes to traditional school is pretty much consistent. So all of them had trouble with just simple time management. And I've seen that with kids I know personally, but we also saw that in the surveys.
And in the conversation about restriction, I think another important component to that too is that students who had been enabled because they had parents who kind of did everything for them really struggled with having to learn how to advocate for themselves, even when it came to, I'm sick, what do I do? Where do I go? And so those kinds of conversations can happen before they arrive on campus, when little things arise, or even just how to structure their summer leading into their leading into their college experience, of what can you do to provide some autonomy for your child before they're out of your household.
Okay, let's skip to that question. So rather than just, kind of there are things you can do, can you give us like your highlights of what right now parents are listening? It's April. If they've got a senior who's college bound, or even just going to be independent more in a different way than they lived right now under your roof, what should the next few months look like?
the first thing is get the messaging right. Oftentimes, what we hear and what is communicated to students is this is going to be the best 4 years of your life, which is like disturbing. Just thinking that we're telling them like you're going to peak at 22. This is the best it's going to get.
It's never getting better.
But I think what is really important and what we are trying our best to communicate within our book and out and talking to students is it will be hard. This transition is a challenging one for multiple reasons, but one, you've never had any practice doing these things on your own. Even if your parents did give you a lot of autonomy, you're facing a whole lot of change. And so I think as parents, as coaches, as teachers, as family, if we can start to have this conversation with young people that it will be hard and that's okay, that's expected. And in fact, if it's not hard, you're one of like the 1 or 2%. So anticipate the challenges. And I think as parents, open the conversation and let them talk. We were so blown away when we did student surveys and when we've had conversations with high school seniors. They're thinking about these things, whether they're verbalizing them or not. They do have some concerns, and giving them the floor or forum to let some of that out, just to be heard. You don't have to provide them with an answer, but just allow them to take a moment to reflect on, I'm worried that I won't make friends. I'm worried that I won't, that like I'll party too hard and won't be able to keep up with my academics, whatever it is. Having an opportunity to have an honest conversation about the fact it will be challenging and letting them think about where they anticipate struggling is a good first step to getting them prepared.
And some specific tips that they can put in their phone, just some very simple lists that we recommend they start thinking about before they arrive on campus. First and foremost are some reset practices. So if on a scale of 1 to 10 on a stress level, I'm not in crisis at a 10, but I'm about a 5 or 6. I'm noticing that I'm starting to feel stress. What am I going to do about this? What are the things that your child can do dependably that does not cost a lot of money, like go for a walk or grab a cup of coffee, but having that list in their phone and starting to think about, well, what are these things that I can do for me that I enjoy doing when I just need to step back and take a break, is a wonderful, simple thing that they can pull up. So when they realize, oh man, I've been sighing a whole lot in the last minute. Oh, look at this, like go find a bench and sit down. Like that's something that they can already have figured out before they arrive on campus.
And that parents can encourage them to do. Yeah.
Well, the beauty of what you're saying is, so in the moments where we maybe dip in our happiness or in our focus, those moments, we're not going to be ideating. We're not going to be creative. And so if that list is on your phone, you've just taken all emotion out of it. And it's just like, which one of these 10 things do I want to do right now? So I think that is rock solid, so helpful for anybody, adults and kids. But before your kid goes to college, like, how did you, so this is hard because you're the coach and not the parents, but as a parent, as a coach, what would you suggest to parents? How do you bring that up to your kid?
I think, hopefully as part of that conversation about the fact, have you thought about the fact that this college transition could be difficult? That's one thing that you can be like, just at some point this summer, try to make a list of things that dependably make you happy. That's a small thing. You're not giving them advice. You're just saying, take a moment and do a little bit of reflection. I think the one thing I would say to parents is be prepared for the fact they're going to struggle and you're not going to be able to fix it, that they're going to have to fix it. And so that can also be a part of the conversation, is you communicating to your kid, it's going to be hard, but I'm not going to be there. And in fact, it's important that you start to come to terms with the idea that you're going to have to make the appointments, or you're going to have to take these proactive steps to get yourself back on the right track. And I think the sooner that clarity can be communicated so that everyone's expectations are aligned, it will make it less confusing in the fall when inevitably these kids struggle and their first step is to call mom, which is not a bad thing. It's just that mom or dad has to be prepared with, and maybe that list has been shared, like, hey, I can't help you, but you can help yourself by going for a walk, grabbing some coffee. And so it's sort of mutually beneficial if the kid takes that time to reflect and can share with their parents, hey, when I'm in a bad spot, you can help me by giving me these tools, reminding me that I actually already have these tools in my little toolbox on my phone.
And something to try is I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say texting is your friend. So even just texting, hey, don't forget you got that list, like that can open up the world of opportunity for them.
bringing up this idea of creating these lists when their friends are around and making
Yeah.
it more of a conversation that's less about I'm speaking directly to you is something that might be worth trying in order to make it seem a little bit more casual. And even if you're being stonewalled in the moment, know that they're listening and it might be something that they consider later. And even if the response that they give back to you isn't, well, let's get out our pens and make a list right now, Mom. This is such a great idea. It is something that just by planting the seeds for this information, you're starting the process for them to be able to think about this on their own, which is ideally what we're aiming for. They can make these decisions.
Well,
Also,
and
the idea of the friends. So I can tell from my experience that my kids' friends didn't eye roll me. My kids did, but my
Yeah.
Right.
my kids' friends actually appreciated it. So it was like going in the back door by doing that. And I would not have thought about that at all. I think that's such great advice. Kids are hanging out in your house and you just walk by and go, "Hey, have you ever thought about the idea of making a list? I read it in this book. I heard it on this Facebook Live." I think can really get that conversation going very differently because your kids' friends are actually going to pay attention to you.
done it with students, we see that they sort of work collaboratively and they share and they're like, oh, what did you put down? And so we've been met with way less resistance with that particular task than you might assume because it's personal. It's not a quiz, it's not some sort of assessment. It's them being able to reflect on what makes them happy, which what a fun thing to have a few minutes to ruminate on if it seems like it's something that will benefit them down the line.
And another quick tip, just to quickly suggest too, is a quick list students can put in their phone of 2 to 5 people they know that care about them, that are not going to the college that they are going to, so that if they are in a moment of crisis, they already have a list of, okay, I know I just called this person. Because inevitably at some point in time, the world that they are building at this new school might not be great. And maybe that's academically, maybe that's socially, whatever the reason is, there's going to be a moment where they might not be digging where they are right now. And so to have a quick lifeline that they know, okay, I'm not feeling great. I just want to call and talk to somebody outside of this world so that I know that it's my whole happiness is not depending on just these people, in this 1 square mile.
Okay, I want to say that we just hit the tip of the iceberg. There's so much wisdom. I mean, well, first of all, you guys seem way too young to have all this wisdom, but you also work with teenagers, and so you get firsthand information from them, and it's really, really valuable. Oh, here's Lori. That's what Lori says. The freshman 15 is real. Our son fits into some clothes barely. We let our son see adults drink responsibly. He was used to seeing that, not as much a big deal his freshman year. We let him have a sip at family celebrations. We took away the mystery, and he knows the responsibility that comes with drinking. He gets it and knows that college is first, but booze and drugs will not make him successful at college. Oh, Lori, you're always so wise. He also hangs out with a group of friends that are like-minded. Okay, thank you for sharing. As always, Lori, thank you. I want to remind everybody we have 4 books to give away. So email me at editor@yourteenmag.com if you want to be entered into the raffle. Here's the book once again, The Greatest College Health Guide You Never Knew You Needed. And honestly, it's a perfect graduation gift. And just to have it lying around your house for your kid to look at and maybe bring up that you read something. Oh, Lori, you're the best. No, you're the best. Anyway, so Jill and Dave, thank you for this endeavor that you took on. I think it's significant that you couldn't find what you were looking for and entrepreneurial that you said, okay, then let's do it. And we're so grateful for the resource. So Jill and Dave Henry, thank you so much for being here with us. And everybody go out and get that book.
Us on. This was a treat to be able to talk to this audience.